It was supposed to be a harmless celebrity panel. A charity gala in D.C. had drawn names from politics, Hollywood, and business. Cameras flashed as guests arrived in black tie elegance. But no one expected the viral moment that would dominate the next 48 hours. Denzel Washington had been invited as a guest speaker on youth leadership and discipline. Across from him, on the same stage, sat Barron Trump, now in his early 20s, freshly out of college, and making headlines with his provocative commentary online. The discussion started light, centered on values and generational differences. The moderator tossed a few questions around. Denzel, ever poised, shared a story about his upbringing and the importance of humility. Then, unprompted, Barron smirked and leaned into his mic. "You know, it's always funny hearing these lectures on discipline from actors who've never had to face real accountability. Hollywood's version of hard work is learning lines and playing pretend." The room shifted. There was a pause. Even the moderator blinked. Some in the audience chuckled nervously. Denzel didn't blink. He simply adjusted his cufflinks, leaned forward, and in a calm, low voice said, "Son, I've spent 40 years mastering my craft, showing up at 5 a.m., working 16-hour days, earning every ounce of respect I've got without writing anyone's last name. You don't learn that pretending. You learn that standing on your own." The audience went still. And then the applause erupted. The standing ovation that followed Denzel's words wasn't just loud, it was immediate. Guests from all political leanings, celebrities, donors, even members of the press rose to their feet. Barron Trump sat frozen, his confident smirk gone. The cameras captured every second. His fingers tapped his thigh under the table, but he didn't say a word. Denzel, still composed, sipped his water and waited for the crowd to settle. The moderator, clearly caught off guard, tried to pivot. "Well, that was certainly a moment. Let's keep it respectful, gentlemen." Denzel nodded. "It is respectful," he said, his voice still calm. "But let's not confuse honesty with hostility. Young men need to learn the difference." Barron finally leaned back into his mic. His tone was defensive now. "With all due respect, Mr. Washington, I don't need life lessons from someone who reads scripts for a living." A few groans from the audience. Denzel's reply was quiet but firm. "I don't read scripts, I choose them. I choose what I represent. Just like today. You chose mockery. I chose truth." Barron opened his mouth to respond again, but Denzel raised a hand, not aggressively, but like a teacher who had already made his point. "And one more thing," Denzel said, locking eyes with him. "Manhood isn't inherited. It's earned." The silence was thunderous. Even the moderator let it hang. The moment Denzel uttered those last words, "Manhood isn't inherited. It's earned." A camera operator zoomed in on Barron's face. The young Trump's expression was somewhere between disbelief and discomfort, the kind you can't disguise in HD. The clip hit social media within minutes. By the time the panel wrapped up and guests began filtering out to the post-gala reception, the internet was ablaze. #Denzel vs. Barron, #earned not inherited, #sit-down Barron. Networks were already lining up reactions. Talk show hosts cleared their schedules. Late-night writers cheered. And within hours, every news outlet was replaying the exchange on loop. But inside the venue, while the world watched, Denzel remained composed. He mingled with guests, answered questions, and never mentioned the clash again. Barron, meanwhile, disappeared from the reception altogether. One reporter spotted him slipping out a back entrance, flanked by two aides, his jaw tight. An attendee from the audience, a retired general, would later tell CNN, "I've seen leaders freeze under pressure. What Denzel did up there. That wasn't acting. That was leadership." The next morning, conservative media scrambled to control the narrative. Some hosts tried to downplay the exchange. Denzel ambushed a young man still learning the ropes. Others, however, didn't hold back. A well-known political commentator on national TV said, Barron stepped into the arena, and got taught what it really means to be a man in front of millions. Meanwhile, Denzel refused all interview requests. His publicist released a single statement, Mr. Washington stands by his words. No further comment. But the silence only amplified the impact. Within the Trump inner circle, there was tension. Insiders leaked that Melania was furious the incident had spiraled so publicly. A source close to the family told a reporter, she warned Barron not to get too cocky on these panels. But he didn't listen. Donald Trump, for his part, went on Truth Social and wrote, Denzel Washington is overrated and a Hollywood elite phony. Barron did great. Tremendous future ahead. But even among Trump's own supporters, many quietly admitted that Barron had been out of his depth. The phrase, manhood isn't inherited. It's earned had become a viral mantra, printed on mugs, shirts, and posters overnight. And Denzel? He flew out quietly that evening to attend a mentorship event in Chicago, where he spoke to young black students about character, silence, and strength. At the mentorship event in Chicago, Denzel took no questions about the Barron exchange. When a young man tried to bring it up during the Q&A, Denzel smiled gently and said, the world saw what it needed to see. Let's talk about you now. He shifted the conversation to discipline, service, and the importance of choosing your moments. Sometimes, he said, you win by speaking. Other times, you win by not needing to. Back in Washington, Barron remained offline for days, no posts, no appearances. His advisors urged him to issue a follow-up statement, something mature and self-aware. But he refused. Meanwhile, the internet had crowned Denzel the undisputed winner. Clips of the encounter were now edited into motivational videos. One viral post paired Denzel's line with black and white footage of great leaders, under the caption, respect isn't demanded. It's commanded. What hit harder than anything else was what Denzel didn't do, he didn't gloat, didn't retaliate, didn't feed the media storm. One high school teacher in Atlanta told MSNBC, it was a public spanking, sure, but it was done with grace. That's what makes it sting. Within a week, Barron resurfaced, noticeably more reserved in his next public appearance. He didn't mention Denzel, but his tone was measured, his words more cautious. And though no one said it aloud, everyone could tell, he had been humbled. Behind the scenes, whispers began circling D.C. social circles and political donors. Barron had lost more than just face. Several organizations that had been courting him for speaking engagements quietly backed away. One tech conference dropped him from its youth panel. A university roundtable postponed his scheduled appearance indefinitely. Meanwhile, Hollywood circles praised Denzel's restraint as much as his words. An unnamed Academy member was quoted saying, what he did wasn't just clap back, it was surgical. And the fact he walked away from the noise? That's power. Even former President Barack Obama, during a public event on civic leadership, alluded to the moment without naming names. There's something deeply valuable about humility. When someone calls you out, especially in public, how you respond shows the world who you are. Audience members erupted in laughter, they knew exactly what he meant. Back in New York, Denzel continued his schedule unbothered, attending charity dinners, visiting film schools, and mentoring young men in under-resourced neighborhoods. When asked by a local journalist how he kept so calm during public attacks, Denzel replied, when you know who you are, you don't need to prove it every time someone throws a stone. That's not discipline. That's just noise. And just like that, he turned down another interview. Days turned into weeks. The buzz surrounding the confrontation began to settle, at least in public. But in private, its impact lingered. Barron Trump, once brash and unfiltered in interviews, started showing signs of reflection. At a closed-door youth forum weeks later, he surprised attendees by opening his speech with a line no one expected, sometimes, the best thing a man can do, is listen. It wasn't an apology. But it wasn't arrogance either. Insiders noted the difference in tone. Gone was the smug, dismissive style. He spoke slower, more deliberately. For once, he didn't interrupt others on the panel. The clip reached Denzel, who was backstage at a charity fundraiser in Los Angeles when someone showed him on a phone. He just gave a small nod. "That's a start," he said. "Let the young man grow." He didn't say anything more. But those nearby noted a faint smile on his face. Later that night, during his own speech, Denzel didn't mention Barron directly, but delivered a powerful message: the loudest voice in the room doesn't make the biggest impact. It's the one that lasts after the echo fades. People stood again. Denzel had turned a brief viral moment into something more lasting, a national conversation about ego, maturity, and earned respect. By the end of the month, news outlets had moved on. But the moment between Barron Trump and Denzel Washington had already cemented itself in modern political pop culture. It was being taught in media ethics classes, quoted in motivational talks, and even adapted into a case study for leadership training seminars. The phrase, "manhood isn't inherited. It's earned," had found its way into everything from school walls to corporate presentations. And yet, Denzel remained silent. No interviews, no articles, no reaction videos, just quiet, continued mentorship, film work, and service. Meanwhile, Barron Trump's team finally released a short press statement: "Every young voice in America, including mine, is shaped by experience. I'm still learning. And I respect those willing to teach, even when it's uncomfortable." No mention of Denzel. But no one missed the implication. That single paragraph circulated widely, even winning cautious praise from political opponents. Some said it was scripted. Others called it genuine. But all agreed, it was a step forward. As for Denzel, when asked privately if he saw the statement, he only responded, "Growth isn't about what you say. It's about what you do next." And with that, he moved on, leaving the country for a quiet trip to Ghana, where he was funding a leadership camp for boys from underserved villages. Because while the world argued over who won the exchange, Denzel had already won where it counted. Months passed. The world's attention shifted, as it always does, but echoes of that night between Barron Trump and Denzel Washington never fully faded. It became one of those moments people referenced without context. Just the mention of "earned, not inherited," brought knowing nods. In schools, Denzel's quote appeared in yearbooks and on classroom walls. One high school even painted a mural of him with the words beneath it. A teacher said, "We wanted our students to understand grace under pressure." That moment said more than any textbook ever could. Barron, now far more reserved, focused on policy forums and youth initiatives, ironically, one of which focused on media responsibility. Some insiders said Denzel's reply had altered the trajectory of his public persona entirely. At a later event, a journalist asked Denzel if he ever saw Barron again. He paused, smiled, and replied, "Once. Briefly." He nodded. I nodded back. That was enough. No drama. No rehashing. Just two men, one who had learned a lesson, and one who never needed to prove he was right. Because in the end, Denzel never raised his voice. He didn't insult, didn't mock, didn't clap back for the cameras. He simply shut it down with truth, and walked away. That silence spoke louder than any mic ever could. A year later, at a global summit on youth empowerment held in Geneva, Switzerland, the organizers made a surprising announcement: both Barron Trump and Denzel Washington had agreed to appear on the same stage. No one knew what to expect. The press speculated. Social media buzzed. Memes resurfaced. But when the moment came, the crowd fell silent as the two men took their seats, just feet apart. The moderator, a Nobel laureate, opened with a simple prompt: "A lot can change in a year. What have you each learned about leadership?" Barron spoke first. No ego. No pretense. He shared honestly about mistakes, humility, and the difference between inherited fame and earned respect. Then came Denzel. True leadership, he said, is about listening more than speaking. It's not about how loud you are, it's about how consistent you are when no one's watching. He looked briefly toward Barron and added, growth takes courage. Owning your flaws takes more strength than hiding behind a name. Barron nodded. The audience, expecting tension, found maturity instead. At the end of the panel, as the applause swelled, Denzel stood up first, extended a hand, and Barron took it. No cameras zoomed in. No dramatic music. Just two men, bridging a moment. And in that simple handshake, they rewrote the end of a story the world had nearly turned into a feud, transforming it instead into a lesson. A reminder, respect isn't granted by legacy, it's earned by character. Long after the handshake in Geneva, the legacy of that moment continued to unfold, not through headlines, but through lives changed. Educators referenced the incident in civics and ethics classes. A documentary team released a short film titled The Moment of Stillness, capturing how a simple reply reshaped a national conversation. Denzel declined to participate, insisting the story belonged to the next generation now. But perhaps the most unexpected twist. Barron Trump quietly launched a mentorship program, focused not on branding, but listening. The first seminar opened with a quote on the screen, "Silence can teach louder than a shout." Washington. He never addressed the origin directly. He didn't need to. People knew. Even political opponents praised the initiative. One columnist wrote, "He may never have chosen to learn the hard way, but once he did, he didn't waste it." And that counts. Meanwhile, Denzel, still as private as ever, was spotted at a community center in South LA, mentoring a group of teenage boys about responsibility and legacy. One of the boys asked him, "Did you mean to shut him down like that?" Denzel smiled. "No. I meant to wake him up." And that's what this story became, not a takedown, not a rivalry, but a wake-up call that echoed far beyond a single stage. Years later, people still talked about it, not as a scandal or feud, but as a defining cultural moment. Something rare in modern politics, a public clash that ended in reflection, not destruction. Universities studied it. Speakers referenced it. And young people across the country remembered the lesson, not just what was said, but how it was said. One college graduate mentioned it during her commencement speech, it wasn't about Denzel being right. It was about being wise. And knowing when to speak truth without losing dignity. Even Barron, now older, more tempered, and focused on public service, occasionally referenced a humbling experience that taught him more than any classroom ever had. As for Denzel, he never wrote a book about it. Never gave a viral podcast. Never cashed in. But whenever he was asked about that moment, his answer stayed the same: if it helped even one person grow, then it was worth it. And just like that, the final word had already been spoken, long ago, with grace, when the world needed it most.